Welcome, everyone. I'm Judith Cone. I'm the Vice Chancellor of Innovation, Entrepreneurship, and Economic Development. And we're here to celebrate and talk about the annual State of Innovation. And we're so pleased to have an amazing group of people with us today. The Chancellor's with us. We have a wonderful panelist. We're going to do a lot of content in an hour, and we are just so grateful that all of you have joined us. People mostly inside the university, but we always have these forums, which we hold 6 times a year. We always have some wonderful partners from outside join the forum, and we have some guests joining us today also. So this is the first time we've had this format, of course, because of COVID. So sorry not to see you. One of the delights of having this is always getting to talk to everybody that hangs around afterwards, because it's like a big buzz of activity. So we're going to come and share your work. This is about you all and what you've accomplished. And again, we can't begin to tell you everything that you have done collectively. And so we hope you will go to Innovate website, which is listed here, and to all of our social media, our newsletter. We're constantly telling your stories. So the way this is going to work is there's a Q&A button that you have available to you. And we want you to submit your questions as you go along. And after the Chancellor speaks, we're going to have a few minutes with him on Q&A. Then we'll also have a Q&A with our panelists. So just start putting your questions in there. We also, because we can't tell everybody's story, we want you to share your stories. So if you will go to the website. I think you need to advance the slide. So we want you to follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn, and you can see the handles here on the screen, and you can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. But for today, we prefer that you use Twitter and LinkedIn, and start tweeting and sharing your story. So again, this is all about celebrating what you've accomplished. And so if you'll use those, and if you'll use the tag for Kevin and myself and Innovate, you see all of that right there. That's going to go away in a second, so grab the information and start tweeting your stories. And without further ado, I'm going to introduce you to the Chancellor. I'm not doing an introduction. You all know him because we're the insider group. And so I just want to turn it over to him in a second. But, you know, we're talking about crisis and how innovation and crisis come together. And there's so many questions in a crisis, like, oh my gosh, what is this? You know, how do we cope? What do we do? And in COVID, one of the big questions was, how do we keep our university moving forward? We have all of this research, we have teaching needs, we have impact, and how do we do that? How do we move to digital learning, which this university did in like 10 days or something? How do we keep people safe? How do we address and respond to the racial injustices that have become on the global mindset? And how do we leverage the universities to make a greater impact, all in the middle of crises? And it's not just one crisis. And so he's been struggling with those questions and bringing together people to advise and be part of decision making. And so we thank you. We know this is not what you signed up for when you became Chancellor, and that you have really, you know, in the fire. And so thank you. Thank you so much for your leadership and for being with us today. We really appreciate it. I'm going to turn it over to you. And remember, please put your Q&A questions in, and I'll turn it over to the Chancellor.
Great. Thanks, Judith. It's great to be here with innovators from across campus for the annual State of Innovation Forum at Carolina. Thanks for your leadership, Judith. And, you know, to your point, I think when you sign up for a job like this, you have to be prepared for whatever might show up on your doorstep on any given day. And when you're part of an incredible team like we have here, you work through these challenges. But this year's theme, how crisis sparks and speeds innovation, could not be more appropriate. Our community, our country, and the world are facing crises from the COVID-19 pandemic and racial injustice to climate change and more. And that's why, you know, it's so important, this work that Innovate Carolina and our incredible team of entrepreneurs and innovators on our campus really make a difference during times like this. These crises converge together. So we need creative ideas and innovation to find solutions. We need a holistic response to the world's challenges, and we need the perspective and energy of a rising generation. And if you go back and look at our charter for the university, which I've been looking at a lot of late as I'm preparing for University Day this weekend, that rising generation is really why we're here. It's what we're about. You are part of a community that's called to innovate and drive change across our state. And there's so many examples of how we do this. Judith already mentioned the very quick shift that our faculty had to make to online teaching back in March. We've got an incredible undergraduate entrepreneurship program that I say is uniquely Carolina because of the way it allows students from any discipline, any department, any major to take part in this. It's the Shuford program in entrepreneurship. Our faculty innovation workshop, where had a chance to speak with you last May, and many of you I know started your work in this area of innovation and entrepreneurship because of that program that's been running for over a decade now. You'll be hearing more today, I think, about some of the drug discoveries by our renowned faculty who intersect with Innovate Carolina, and faculty-led programs aimed at helping North Carolina businesses hit restart to help drive the North Carolina economy over the past few months. But we need solutions quickly to these problems, and Carolina innovators are doing that. You've heard a lot about Dr. Ralph Barrick and his research team that developed remdesivir. They've working closely with the World Health Organization, and in terms of trying to find treatments for this, their lab partnered with Gilead to develop that test or develop that drug back in 2014, and we're finding that it's helpful now, 6 years later, around a new disease and pandemic. So stay tuned, you'll be hearing more about that. Our Beam Makerspace, stepped up back in March and April, developing PPE. In just over 40 days, created 40,000 face shields for frontline medical workers here on campus and around North Carolina. The North Carolina Policy Collaboratory received funding for COVID research and was passed by the General Assembly and signed then by Governor Cooper back in May, and it's distributing $29 million for COVID-19 research across several institutions across the state of North Carolina, and 85 different projects on treatment, testing, and prevention. And so just again, another way in which UNC-Chapel Hill has stepped up. We have research is not just about the dollar amount that I talk about. We're going to set another record this year. We're about 14% ahead of where we were last year in overall research funding at Carolina, where last year we set a new record. But I often say it's not just about the dollar amount, but it's about the impact that work has on society and improving lives. So we are using this opportunity to explore new ways of teaching. I had a chance 2 weeks ago to sit in on one of our new data science classes it's in our Carolina Away program for mostly students who just couldn't get to Chapel Hill this fall to live and learn. Most of our international students are taking part in the Carolina Away program. About 700 students are enrolled. And this data science class looked at the way in which these pandemics are studied, and we had a researcher from Oxford that joined Richard Smith, who's one of our, he's the co-instructor on this COVID-19 investigations class for the Carolina Way program, and together they talked with the class about the way data science can really influence and have a positive impact on solutions to it during a time of a pandemic. So just another way in which we're rethinking how we prepare this next generation of leaders, that rising generation that I talked about. And we're going to be a university that's going to emerge from this pandemic stronger. We're not just going to tinker around the edges as we look for ways to change the way we deliver instruction, the way we research and innovate. And I'm determined that we will prepare students for that unknown future because there will be something else, there will be something more out there, and we want our students to look back on the year 2020, and to say that we made it through that period. And this is what we did to improvise, adapt, and adjust to the what we were faced with. And so I'm committed to making these changes here. And our strategic plan, Carolina Next, is about investing in those areas on campus that can have the biggest impact. And I keep saying that despite the pandemic, our university never really closed down. And I think Innovate Carolina and what we're about to talk about today is a perfect example of this. So this is a time of great uncertainty, but also a time of opportunity. And crises give us an opportunity to make changes that seemed impossible before. And we have an opportunity to drive the economy of our state forward and have a greater impact on the citizens of North Carolina and beyond. So your work and innovative ideas are critical for this endeavor. And I want to also just take a moment to thank Kirk Bradley, the CEO and president of Lee Moore Capital. Will be announcing today their generous gift to expand programming at UNC-Chapel Hill, an award-winning accelerator that you're all aware of. And UNC-Chapel Hill was created with a partnership between the UNC-Chapel Hill, the town of Chapel Hill, and Orange County. And it's really enabled us to drive economic growth, expand services to startups in our community, and assist entrepreneurs as they recover from the economic crisis created by the pandemic. So thank you, Kirk. Thanks to all of you for being here today. And so I'm going to turn it back over to Judith now, and I'm happy to take questions if we have some time.
Great. Thank you so much. Those were great comments, and we're going to build on those. And I looked in some of the questions. There are some great questions. So I think I'm turning this over, and we'll have your first question. And thanks again for your remarks.
Chancellor, we have one question come in. One person asked, how do you think innovation will continue to evolve at the university?
Well, I think we have to look beyond just the areas where we've been focused, and that's just one of the reasons why I really like the boot camp, the workshop that happens every May. And Judith, I know I said it's been over a decade. How many years running?
Yeah, I think 10 years.
10
right.
years.
Yeah.
And so many of our faculty, many who had never thought about being an entrepreneur or trying to commercialize their science or their scholarship. And I think that's been a big part of it. And I think it's why we have if you look across the spectrum of startups and patents that have come out of Carolina over those 10 years, it's not just focused in one area or a few different areas. And I think that's important. We have to continue to find other areas where we can innovate and bring more diversity into this Innovate Carolina enterprise. So that would be my goal. And I think the last thing I'll say is that we have to be able to shift a little bit. If you look at what our scholars in our infectious disease area have done just over these past 6 months, many of those experts their work has been focused for many years in HIV and AIDS, but yet they understand the way a pandemic and an infectious disease evolves. And so they adjusted their research just a little in a very short order of time to help us lead in COVID-19. And if you recall, back in mid-April, fairly short time after that pandemic began, Microsoft Analytics ranked Carolina as the #1 university in the U.S. that was having an impact, whose research was having an impact in this COVID-19 area. And so I think it's just being able to adjust and modify a bit, bringing that expertise to the table to take on and address a new issue, a new problem.
We have another question that came in. What role should the university play in fostering innovation in the local startup ecosystem?
Did you say the global?
What role should the university play in fostering innovation in the local startup ecosystem? In the local,
yes. Listen, I'm very passionate about this. I've talked with, I'm part of, as Judith is part of the Research Triangle Park board. We're trying to find ways to bring the 3 or 4 local universities together to partner more. We had a really great session back right in late February before the pandemic with all 4 chancellors over at RTI talking about how we need to partner more and to help drive the economy in North Carolina, each bring their expertise to the table. And we, sadly, I think it was 12, 15 days after that, after we had that seminar, the pandemic showed up and we lost a little momentum there. So we have to pick that back up. It's our job as a leading global public research university to be sure that we're playing a role in driving the local economy. And I talk about that broadly, across North Carolina, but certainly here in Chapel Hill and Orange County. I know that we have mayors of Chapel Hill and Carrboro and a county commissioner that feel deeply about this and want to partner with us. And I've enjoyed looking at these opportunities just right here on Franklin Street that Judith and others and we've been talking about. So that is our responsibility. We have to develop a plan for downtown Chapel Hill and Orange County to think about economic growth. And I want to partner with community leaders to do that.
Thank you. Do you have another one, Akib?
Yes, this is the last question we will take.
Okay.
And
Okay.
this one, what have you found most interesting about the INE work coming out of UNC?
I didn't hear you.
Yes, what have you found most interesting about the INE work coming out of UNC?
Innovation and entrepreneurship work coming out of UNC.
Yes, I think it's, again, it's the breadth of the work and the way in which many of our faculty who maybe didn't think that they could play in this space. And I think that they've had opportunities, they've tested it, they enjoy doing it. And I think that one of the things that we do, it's this culture of collaboration at Carolina that I love most. And so whether you're have a background in physics or applied math, or your work is in the social sciences and sociology, social entrepreneurship is a big part of our fabric, a part of what we do. It's bringing these different disciplines together, this culture of collaboration that I think really, it's unique to Carolina. I think that we do this better than anybody. We sometimes call this convergent science, but it's bringing together different researchers and entrepreneurs from different fields to solve these grand challenges. And that's part of our secret sauce, as I say, here at Carolina, and we're going to continue to innovate through these collaborative efforts.
Thank you so much, Akib, for managing that. Akib is a recent grad, and so he's on our team, and he's amazing. So we're happy to have his face shown here. We had a question in another format that I think is really important for Kevin. It's a longer question, so I won't read it. I'm going to summarize it. It came from Lee Burrows, and it is about how legacy systems like Walmart and Target get taken over by the newbies that are more flexible, like Amazon. And how are you seeing this crisis and the kind of what I call the power of the installed base dragging us down to stay status quo, and then leaping forward to be out there ahead? And I know you've talked about this, about those who just stay the same will not survive in the long term. You want to have just a couple of comments about your thoughts about being ready for the future and using this crisis?
Sure, Lee, that's a great question. And I've said that there will be three types of universities that will probably emerge from this pandemic. And the ones that, that are stubborn, I think they can just continue to do business as usual, I think are going to struggle, and some will. The second type, I think, will maybe change some things along the margins and probably revert back to doing business as usual. I'm going to be that third type of university that really reimagines itself coming out of the pandemic. We've been talking for quite a while about how we can expand our footprint at Carolina, and I say that about in teaching, research, and service, and not just having status quo and continuing to say, well, we can only serve X number of students and provide X amount of service across the state. This is an opportunity. The pandemic it's forced us into an experiment almost about how we deliver instruction, and that Carolina Way program is a perfect example. That's not status quo at all. It's not, but it's also not jumping into the way that Coursera and Kaplan and other online programs have operated. We have to do it our way, the Carolina way, as we say, and that's what I think the pandemic has done. It's taught faculty that have never thought about teaching remotely that they can actually do this and do it really well and so proud of many faculty. I'm teaching a class, co-teaching a class this fall. First time I've ever taught online remotely, and finding that I too can do it. I'd much rather be in person, but when this pandemic hit, we had to all adjust. So we're going to continue to innovate in the teaching, research, and service. And while probably 75 to 80% of our research labs are now up and running in person, there is 20 to 25% that are finding that they can be just as effective at conducting their research through a remote environment. And so there's been adjustments there as well. So we'll continue to innovate, and we're going to be that reimagined university that we'll be proud of, and we're expanding our footprint.
Thank you. I think that's such an important question and answer. Thank you so much. Hope you can stay on a little while with us. And we're going to, again, thank you so much for everything you're doing. I know you work around the clock 7 days a week. So, and for your family and all the sacrifices everybody's making to keep us coping and actually excelling in some ways. It's been quite remarkable. Thank you so much, Kevin.
Thanks, Judith. Thanks to everyone.
Thank you. Okay, so, you know, what Kevin's talking about is speed of response. So immediately when fortunately we had infectious disease experts who have actually predicted the pandemic and have worked ahead of time trying to get people to listen to what they were seeing. And so we had a lot of expertise. He mentioned Ralph Barrick, and we have a lot of others in our medical and science, life science groups. And so we saw this rapid response. At the same time, we heard the call for PPE, and we said, you know, oh my gosh, you know, people need these things. So as he mentioned, Rich and the makerspace and a bunch of people got together and produced 40,000 shields in record time. I want to give a nod to Michelle Bolus, who's our Associate Vice Chancellor. Kevin asked her, will you be the point person to kind of coordinate for the campus between the governor's office and the university and the medical campus and the hospital? And so she stepped up and played that coordinating role, and everybody did a phenomenal job. And so there's so many stories about this rapid response. I'm going to tell you a few of those later. But here's the thing that's so remarkable about this. We changed our teaching methodology. We changed our research methodology. We solved big pressing issues in record time. The crisis made us fast. Universities are not known for fast. We're contemplative. We're committee driven. We're consensus. You know, it's the way of the university, which has a lot of reasons to be that way. But it showed that we can work at a speed and a sense of urgency that was amazing to watch. And so we think about, like, take any of the grand challenges facing the world, and let's just look at North Carolina with more than 1 million children living in poverty and having, you know, unstable sources of food. So if that was a crisis, like the pandemic was a crisis, what would we do? So I think the challenge, one of the lessons to take from this is, how do we keep that sense of urgency and collaborative spirit and break through all the rules and the regulations and the policies to say, you know, it is an urgent issue and we're going to come together and do that. So I hope that's a lesson that we can take with us among the many lessons that we've learned. So, you know, again, this is about celebrating today impact that we've already made. And so we just published a report this morning, and it's called I'm going to close my little window. It's in my view here. Okay. The report's called From Ingenuity to Impact. And this is our second year to issue this report. And it really focuses on a segment of impact. And so if you really want to see the whole picture of impact for the university, you go to innovate.unc.edu. And that is the spot, the portal for everything about everybody's work on campus. It's not just about Innovate Carolina's role. And we tell your story, we collect your impact data. And so please go there. And so this one's hot off the press. We're really happy to put this out, and this is about commercialization and its social impact on what we call IP-based startups, intellectual property-based startups from faculty. So that again is a subset, and I think one of the reasons that we've had such a great community being built is that we don't take a narrow definition of innovation. So we say innovation are ideas successfully implemented that have value. And we don't say it has to be a startup, it has to be a not-for-profit, it's all over. It's an idea that has impact. And we don't care what vehicle carries that idea. And so that broad definition really makes a lot of people on this campus feel like this is applicable to them. This report is about a subset, the faculty-based startups. And so it's filled with stories and questions and answers with our top inventors, which are faculty. And often faculty do this with their graduate students. So we sometimes forget that we kind of talk about the faculty, but almost all of them have teams of graduate students, and they often share the inventorship with graduate students. So if any revenue does come back and flow through to the inventor, often when you look at that list, it has graduate students on that. And so I really am excited for you to dig through this report. It's a phenomenal story. I'm going to give you just a few highlights. So as Kevin said, you know, at last report, when we looked it up, we're at 1.14 billion in research funding. And that's an amazing number. That puts us up in the top, 5, 4, 8, depends on which measure you're looking at. So it's an incredible amount of trust and hope that funders are putting into the people of this university, the faculty, staff, and students. And so, of course, it is about how do we then translate some of that into practical social and economic value. So we keep records of everything that we do and everything that you do. And we look at this report in 5-year buckets because this kind of work is slow. It takes many years to get things done in a commercialization, especially in human life science. And so we compare 5-year buckets to see how are we performing against ourselves, right? And so we're going to compare here the current 5-year period that ended in 20 to the previous 5-year period, 11 through 15 on the fiscal years. So if you look at invention disclosures, that is when a faculty member lets us know they're working on something that might be protectable, might have intellectual property associated with it. And so they fill out a disclosure, it goes to the Office of Technology Commercialization. So invention disclosures are up 22%. Now that's the beginning of the pipeline. If we don't get a disclosure, there's nothing else that follows. And so then we evaluate that. And then when we think that it is valuable enough to spend patenting dollars on, we apply, and we're up in 26% in those applications. Now here's the really important one. You know, a lot of people apply to the patent office and they don't all get approved, of course. There's a big turndown rate. We have a 66% increase in approved patents. That means we're doing a good job on our submissions. We have great quality work behind it. And so that's a great number. And then the revenue that comes back. So when we do get something patented, we do issue a license. About half of those licenses go to industry and about a little less than, so it's probably 60-40, 60 go outside to industry, and then about 40 get licensed right back into the faculty startup. The reason we do that is often that intellectual property is so early and so unproven, but they have to start a company so they can get SBIR money, grants. Then nobody else is ready to take it. They want somebody else to take the risk. So we work with those faculty startups and help them through this very complex process of trying to get their idea to be proven. And when you think about what the world's going through with trying to get vaccines and treatments, you see the complexity of what everybody's facing. So we're very proud that we're up 22%, 26, 66, and 58% on all of our measures. And so that is exciting news. So let me just tell you a little bit about these faculty startups. So there's 135 of them since 1958. we keep a longitudinal database. So all of this information is checked and double checked and triple checked. And so we love our longitudinal database. So just in the last 2 years, we've had 14 faculty startups. These in 1 year, in 2020, the 135 raised 253 million. Well, I'm sorry, they had 253 million in annual revenue. And I always tell people, think about what revenue is spent on. It's developing the product and service, but it's always first the people. So the first thing you do is hire people with, the money that you raise or that investors put in your company, or you bring in revenue, you turn that right back into your company. So 1,308 people are employed in these companies, and most of those are in North Carolina. So let's look at the total across the whole period. 731 total IP-based and non-IP based. So, there's a subset, 135. The big total of all the ones we're tracking is 731. And 84% are headquartered in North Carolina. They bring in last year, 15 billion in annual revenue. And they employ 87,000 plus people globally. And a goodly number of those are in North Carolina. So startups have a tremendous economic and social value. We think about these statistics and we forget that they're trying to cure cancer or diabetes, or they're working on autism, or any number of other like digital and game and all kinds of things. And we forget about that product and that need that drove them to do the research and then to step into the world of trying to get that product to the marketplace, which is a foreign thing for them. So we're very excited that we have people that help us do this work and who make contributions. And we're excited. Kevin brought up the announcement of this gift, and we're so excited about this. And so Lee Moore Capital Company has made a significant gift to Launch-Chapel Hill. And that has come in through the university because Launch-Chapel Hill is a private-public partnership. And it is between the town of Chapel Hill, Orange County, the university, and donors. And so we have great success in our accelerator downtown. So just want to again thank Kurt Bradley and his family and his interesting story about he's the CEO and president of Lee Moore Capital, and Frank Proctor he's the other co-owner, and they're relatives, and they're committed to spreading the entrepreneurial spirit instilled in them by their late father and uncle, Truby G. Proctor Jr., throughout North Carolina. So Truby Proctor is the late father of Frank and uncle of Kurt. And Truby and Frank are both Carolina alumni. So it's really great to see it come full circle. The past generation were entrepreneurs. They passed along that entrepreneurial spirit, and now they're making a contribution to Launch to help these new companies do their work. So that's a very exciting news, and there's going to be a press release and everything about that. So thank you. I wish we could see you and talk to you about that, but we'll find another time to do that, and just wanted to thank you so much. And so let's talk a little bit about the stats on Chapel Hill. There's 136 companies that got started there. I think you might want to just go back. I don't know. You can stay on that slide if you want. Doesn't matter. And so they have raised 38 million. Now think about these small companies, 136 companies right here downtown. They have raised $38 million. What do they do with the money? They hire people, they create their products and services and distribute those. There's 1,000+ jobs that have come out of those companies, and 84 million in total revenue just in 1 year, 2020. So, I mean, and that's a fiscal year. So that's an amazing output from this wonderful accelerator. And the gift from Lee Moore Capital is really going to help us even accelerate those numbers. So we've been talking about crises, and obviously COVID is on our mind. But, you know, we were talking about pandemics before COVID hit. Like I said, 30 years of experience here on this campus, Ebola, SARS, and so many more things. And we were, now people are listening to us, and we're going to be better prepared. And hopefully we will never have to face something like this again, because we will have learned from this, and all of the work that's been done on our campus and around the world will be here. But we're facing so many other crises. Of course, the racial injustice has crippled the nation and the world, and has raised consciousness yet again about the problems with justice and equality, and the failure to live up to what we believe are the moral standards facing everyone. And it's everyone's issue. And I mentioned hungry children, and hunger and access to water and basic resources, that never goes away. And of course, we're seeing the environmental crises literally have, you know, part of our country's on fire. And of course, we just went through that with Australia. So cyber threats endangering us, and economic downturn. Now we're going to have to, you know, innovate our way out of the economic crisis that has come from this. So, you know, that's why people are at this university. They care about all of this. And if somebody was making their own to-do list, it could be many other things. But it calls on us to remember that sense of urgency, and to recall how we rallied, and to make that part of our now going forward way to do business, instead of going back to a slower pace. So when we talk about innovation, we use that word a lot. And I mentioned this earlier, we talk about putting important ideas to use for the public good. And so here's our formal definition of innovation. We say it starts with creativity, and it has to have value, and then it has to be successfully implemented, or execution. And so that's our definition. It's not just about the idea, because ideas start these things, but if it just stays there, it never brings that value that other people need out of this. And of course, we're all about, the university's about solving those grand challenges that we just had that picture about. So let's move to the next. This is about you all. I love this. This is the first time I've seen a graphic in this form. We've had network pictures before, and I love this because it talks about you and it shows the connections, and it's only a sample. Again, it would be too crazy to try to fill out this whole thing, but we have it, you know, behind the scenes, but to depict it. And so, you know, there's more than 300 people and programs that regularly work together. And it's just an amazing network. And Kevin mentioned collaborative spirit at the university, and that is so uniquely here. It's quite amazing. Again, you know, we're connected, we collaborate, and we now know how to move at the speed of light. You know, this all started back in 2010 with the Innovation Roadmap. And that was Chancellor at the time, Holden Thorpe, and it was chaired by Lowry Caudle, an amazing alumni and donor to the university. And we had a strategic plan that came out of that. And there were 5 recommendations back in 2010. It's amazing. And they have held up. And that whole strategic plan was written by 118 people, faculty, staff, students, and external people. And I know that because I got all of their edits and got to integrate all of that into a plan. So the first one was prepare faculty, graduate students, and undergraduate student staff, and the whole community in the how to have the knowledge, skills, and connections necessary to translate ideas into innovations. And the second was collaborate with diverse groups on campus and beyond to explore issues, options, and creative approaches that may lead to innovations. And that the third is translate, do it. Important new ideas, successfully implemented, put them there. 4 is align. And this is very important internally to an organizational structure and leadership, because if you say you want these outcomes and you want to do this mission vision and you do not align the resources and the processes to the vision, then you will fail in that endeavor. And you have seen how this university is working its way into aligning vision and mission, resources and processes. And we talked a lot about that at the at the beginning, and now it is becoming more a reality. And then the last one was Catalyze. That was sort of setting us up in Innovate Carolina to be a central gatekeeper, certainly not owning the work, but facilitating your work. And so it's amazing what has happened in the last 10 years, and you have done that. And we talk about this impact report as one segment, and if you look on the website and you see the other reports, it's quite amazing. Kevin talked about us being acknowledged as a major, the leading university in COVID and the most trusted resource. That's so amazing. So I want to talk about, I would like to talk about all of these people, but there is not enough time. And of course, a lot of you have heard about Ralph Barrick's work, and so we just want to acknowledge Ralph. But there's Sam Lai is on there, and he's in the pharmacy school, and he's working on antibiotic, monoclonal antibiotic candidates for inhaled immunotherapies against the respiratory issues in COVID. Mark Schoenfish is a professor in chemistry. He's working on using nitric oxide in COVID, respiratory again. Jenny Ting is developing a vaccine that optimizes all three branches of the immune system. And Ray Lee is doing a new emergency ventilator. So the next segment here is Carol Lewis. She was mentioned earlier. She stepped up to lead the hospital in its response to PPE and other parts of the response to COVID. And again, from Michelle, Rich Superfine, remember the 40,000 shields in 40 days? I think that sounds biblical. And then Devin Hubbard has developed a novel face mask device, and especially modifying that for the pediatric segment of patients. And then on the other side is Rachel Good. She's in social work, and she immediately started studying and talking about the disproportionately essential workers are disproportionately women of color and disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And so that her research is around that. Rachel Noble of the Institute of Marine Science is tracking COVID infection through wastewater. Sherrod Crum is the founder of the UNC Black Entrepreneurship Initiative and started that. And Liz Chen immediately said, oh, we've got to get these healthcare workers back in, you know, remember at the beginning of the crisis. And people were saying, well, who's going to take care of my children? So Liz got on that immediately and launched childcarenc.org with a group of people from public health and others. Laurie Carter is public health, and she is leveraging an effort to work with rural Black faith-based social connections to spread information about COVID and how to prevent it. And then Barbara Fredrickson in psychology is looking at the behavioral aspects of why don't people adhere to mask wearing and all the things that we know that help deter this. So on and on and on and on. I wish, you know, that you will study up on what all these people have been doing. So let's now switch to our amazing panel. Susan Barber is the Dean of the Graduate School and Professor of Biochemistry. Remember to put your Q&A in here. Ronit is Associate Professor in the Department of Applied Physical Sciences, Ronit Friedman. Stephen King is Associate Professor at Huseman School of Journalism and Media and Director of the Reese Innovation Lab. Nehemiah Stewart is a UNC student and founder of Vector Ride Share and Level the Playing Field. So we're gonna go in sequence and turn this over to one panelist at a time. And then again, please put your Q&A in. And so Susan, we're gonna hear from you and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Judith, and thank you for the opportunity to be with you all today to talk about a project that's emerged for us over the last couple of months. It's called I4 Boundary Spanners. Can I have the next slide, please? And the moniker for I4 Boundary Spanners is Include, Identify, Investigate, and Influence. And so I want to talk to you about it in three segments. I'll first talk to you a little bit about the genesis of the project. I'll tell you a little bit about a pilot we're running this fall. And then finally, I'd like to talk to you a little bit about what we hope the future will be for this project. Next slide, please. So the genesis of I4 Boundary Spanners comes in a variety of directions. I'm on a committee called CEOS. It's the Committee on Equal Opportunities in Science and Engineering. This is a congressionally mandated panel that basically provides the National Science Foundation with some guidance on how it should work to broaden participation in science and engineering. And in its 2017-2018 report, CEOS suggested that the National Science Foundation should support more community-engaged research as an opportunity to broaden participation at that level and ultimately, hopefully, result in a broader participation in other levels of science and engineering. At the same time, we're seeing an increasing number of graduate students who are opting out of academic careers and opting to do careers that are in the public sector. We also find that millennial students, and in particular underrepresented students, often express an interest in some sort of meaning in the work they're doing. They often express an interest in giving back to their communities in some way. At the same time, there is, as you know, an increasing distrust of science, distrust of higher ed among the general public, and unfortunately even among some of our legislators. And that, of course, brings up concerns about budget, the perceived value of graduate education, and the perceived value of science among the general public. So when you take all this together and add to it the pandemic, there's an opportunity to engage students in a way that ultimately will hopefully dispel some of that distrust in a way that allows graduate students to make a difference in their communities and at the same time realize the value of STEM and express more satisfaction in their careers in STEM. And so that's basically the genesis of I4 Boundary Spanners. They're meant to be individuals who have technical skills because they are graduate students, are being trained in their individual technical areas, but they also have humanistic skills so they can engage communities in authentic ways that allow the community to really have a voice, have an opportunity to weigh in on the science that's done to benefit the community. Next slide, please. So we were very, very lucky to get a pilot grant from the NC Policy Collaboratory to run a pilot for I4 Boundary Spanners this fall of 2020. And we got our grant back in July. Thank you, Jeff Warren, for the opportunity. We very, very quickly recruited 47 applications for 6 funded slots for graduate students this fall. And what you see on the right-hand side of this slide is a snapshot of Jeff over there in the upper left. And some of our colleagues who are part of the project. I'll talk about them in just a few minutes. And importantly, you see our graduate students. As you can see on the left-hand side, these graduate students come from a variety of disciplines. Some are master's students, some are PhD students, but they're all paired with PIs who come from across the university and are working on COVID-19 related projects. And importantly, these are all projects that are happening in the community. And so our goal this fall was to recruit these graduate students, to give them the opportunity to work on community-focused projects that were related to emerging from the pandemic, and also to give them the opportunity to start developing those humanistic skills that would allow them to authentically interact with members of the community. Now, quite frankly, most of these students are social sciences students who already have a lot of those skills. And to be honest, we're learning a lot from them about how we can tailor this program to ultimately help other STEM students who maybe don't have those skills to be effective when they engage communities moving forward. And so speaking of moving forward, next slide, please. I want to tell you a little bit about what we hope will be the future of I4 Boundary Spanners. We're actually in the process of renaming it, and I apologize that my slide on the right-hand side, the text is so small. We're in the process of renaming this North Carolina Boundary Spanners, and our goal is to secure additional funding to keep this project going. The funding source we're looking at right now is called Innovations in Graduate Education. It's a National Science Foundation program, and it's meant to allow universities to test new and innovative strategies in graduate education that may ultimately be scalable to other universities across the country. And what you can't see on the right-hand side is that we've formed a partnership with obviously the Policy Collaboratory, but also 8 other graduate schools across the University of North Carolina system to essentially disperse the I4 Boundary Spanners concept across our state. Our goal, if you look at the left-hand side of the slide, is to provide training for all STEM graduate students in the form of, first of all, a virtual career fair. Secondly, some virtual career exploration that will allow graduate students to determine whether careers in science policy, in science communication and media, in outreach, and in community engagement are the right career paths for them. For those students who make the decision that those are the right career paths, you can see the funnel gets narrowed down toward the bottom, they become North Carolina boundary spanners. We're planning a pan-UNC course called Boundary Spanning 101 that will provide these STEM students with that training in humanistic skills, an opportunity to get a sense of how our state government works, how local governments work, how they can engage media effectively to dispel some of the myths about science and to ultimately increase confidence in science. In addition, these students will have the opportunity to do a community action project in the community that surrounds their institution. And again, the goal here is for them to have the opportunity to both practice the skill sets that they've learned in Boundary Spanning 101, and also to start influencing community, bringing community into the conversation, and again, increasing confidence in science. These students will also participate in Graduate Education Day. That's an ongoing activity where graduate students go to Raleigh and interact with legislators. And our goal there is for them to interact with those legislators on behalf of the communities that they've served. And then finally, in a new approach, we're also looking to develop a UNC system-wide TEDx that will allow both these students and the community members that they serve to influence and to provide the public and legislators with a perspective on the importance and value of the science that they've done in the communities. So next slide, please. So that hopefully is the future. Of the deadline for that proposal is in November. We hope to find out something about that in the next 6 months. But I just wanted to end by telling you a little bit about the interdisciplinary team that's brought this together. You may notice there's a picture of a bus down at the bottom right-hand corner of this slide. The reason I show that to you is that most of us met on the Tar Heel bus tour last fall. And when we met on the Tar Heel bus tour, we had no idea that a pandemic was coming. We had no idea that we would get together in this way again. But I have to say that the Tar Heel bus tour was the catalyst for a lot of what we're doing. And so in closing, I thank Deb Icat, Todd Van Door, Jason Kramer, Melinda Lowry, and of course, Jeff and the Policy Collaboratory for all they've contributed to this project and all the exciting things we see moving forward with our new collaboration with graduate schools from across the state. Thank you, and I'll look forward to answering any questions you have.
Thank you so much, Suzanne. That was incredible. So we're going to turn it over to Ronit Freeman. Ronit.
Good morning, everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. So I'm Ronit. I'm an associate professor in the Department of Applied Physical Sciences. And next slide, please. So in normal times, we work on regenerating tissues and organs, developing materials for regenerative medicine. And similar to the way tissues and organs need the environment to grow and nourish and develop, the same way with science and innovation, we really cannot do it without the right environment, without the right partners. So when I say, I'm going to speak about our work, when I say ours, is really many, many partners here at UNC and also around the US and really around the world that really came together. And I'm going to talk about really emphasize three activities that we are participating and active in developing therapeutics, developing diagnostics, and developing data and modeling tools to study and understand the disease better. Next slide, please. So really, similarly to the way Judith used numbers and data to show what was going on in the last year, I'm going to show you what really was happening since this pandemic has started. I like saying, never let a crisis go to waste. So in this case, the same way Chancellor Guskiewicz was saying that we need to really move and morph our activities and really in a way use that to our advantage to accelerate discovery, to accelerate innovation, and really take us to new and exciting directions that maybe we did not envision before. And this is exactly what we did. And in terms of how fast can we move, I really want to highlight there's several things or several tools we could use or that this pandemic has highlighted that we could use to accelerate innovation in science. But I really want to highlight these specific ones. So the first one really is the rapid response funding mechanisms, which really changed the way we are funding research and innovation right now and really accelerated and really gave the right fuel for us to be able to be active and develop these wonderful activities. In that, I want to highlight really the 4 proposals we had funded in the last 6 months from NSF, from the Research Corporation for Science and Advances, who gave us 2 out of their 7 national awards, for COVID research. And of course, the NC Policy Collaboratory, who gave a bit more fuel for us to accelerate and really enabled us to hire more people. And it's really the men and women power that really does all the work. So thank you very much for that. This activity is involving really 10 research groups, around 5 university collaboration, a little bit under $1 million in funding that really enables us to contribute to this pandemic. The second one I want to highlight is really the power of computational modeling and simulation that really enables us to see the unseen. These tools by many of my collaborators that I'm going to mention in a second have really enabled us to make discoveries and identify druggable pockets and other types of designs that otherwise would not really enable us to accelerate design of drugs and therapeutics the way we have. So this is one effort that really this pandemic is highlighted as highly efficient in accelerating discovery. Imaging, again, this pandemic has highlighted how the use of high-resolution imaging, transmissions, and scanning electron microscopy, cryo-electron microscopy, and you can see here this beautiful EM that one of my students, Maggie Daly, acquired in the last few days of how finely you could see all the different features on the virus, and that really enables us to study it better. Of course, collaborative community, and that's not just in academic, government, industry, and really it united us all by a common goal, or in this case a common enemy, but really brought together and removed or lowered the threshold for collaboration, and really developing a sense of trust where we share our discoveries faster, we share preliminary results, we share resources, things that before we really did not do as much. And I hope with this type of community engagement will carry over also in peacetime and not just in pandemic times. High throughput technologies, especially for screening therapeutics, for assays, for antibodies, and also I would highlight glycomics, the use of sugar science, which I will highlight in a second as well. And really this one, if you think about it, is the first global pandemic that was fought with the power of the internet. And this also revolutionized the way we come together as a community, especially now with social distancing. And without the internet, we would have a big challenge in our hands. So sharing discoveries, databases, vetting the data in real time, and really communicate science and get to the population and the public that really is the customer of everything we do. This really, these are some of the tools and some of the important advancement that we had in the last few years that we can really capitalize on and use to our advantage to fight this pandemic. Next slide, please. So I'm going to give you a bit of some of the science highlights of some of our activities. And we all have seen these coronavirus images many times, and we know the coronavirus is decorated with what we call spikes, these beautiful red proteins that you see here surrounding the virus. And this spike protein, next please, it usually is just looking like that, is attached to the membrane coat of the virus. And this is how we think about a protein, where a bunch of amino acids coming together in 3D. But really, in reality, next please, it really looks like that. It has a coat of sugars. And for me, sugar is a good thing. In this case, who knew sugar can be a threatening thing? So all these really beautiful blue coats here are sugars that are doing two things. They're shielding the virus so it can evade the immune system, but they're also helping it infect our cells in a very particular manner. So together with partners from UCSD and Stony Brook University that are really world experts in atomic simulations and glycomics, these two of these high tool performance tools that I mentioned before, we are able to identify some of these exposed areas, as you could see, that are not coated with sugars, and some of the critical sugars in order to identify druggable pockets so we can streamline antibody production and other types of design of peptides and DNA antibodies that will capture these expose sites and will be able to neutralize the virus. So really that highlights how the increased role of basic and applied sciences, tools that are usually used for exploratory science or discovery, are now used for clinical translation drug development approaches. Next, please. Next, please. Another of our activities, really around developing diagnostics. We all know how important currently detection is, and specifically it has to be fast, it has to be sensitive, and it has to be selective to really give us an answer that we can trust. And this is a need that is global all over the world. So here, we are leveraging activities that we had in normal times, developing DNA and peptide-based approaches to detect different pathogens and different molecules. And we are partnering with Ohio State University to then label them on a surface-enhanced Raman scattered surfaces. This is a very, very sensitive approach to be able to detect down to a single molecule detection of the virus and its proteins. And we are hoping to have a working system that we are now screening within the next few weeks. So really the funding that we have gotten really helped us accelerate this development and hire the right personnel to be able to screen and develop and test these types of devices. So that's a very exciting development that we hope to be able to test very, very soon. Next slide. And the last highlight I want to give is around thinking about how this disease is behaving and understanding it better, both in terms of transmission and infection. This effort is really captained by Greg Forrest from the Applied Math, and I'm fortunate to participate together with Sam Lai from Pharmacy. In this case, if you look at the right panel, we all know or understand already some things about the clinical timeline of the disease. We have some asymptomatic periods where we just get infected. Then we have some mild symptoms that suddenly in a few days burst into severe symptoms, and especially deep lung infection. While we understand these individual parts already, we actually don't know exactly how this virus is ending up in the deep lung, how is it making its way there. And if we understand that, can we interfere in very strategic time points with the progression of the disease? And can we think about inhaled therapies such as the ones Sam Lai is developing and how they would be transported into the deep lung in an efficient way? So in this case, Greg Forrest and his team together with us are modeling mathematically how the virus might transport into the deep lung, how our breathing might affect it, how aerosols versus droplets, a very, very hot topic right now, might be in play, and give really the community, both scientific and clinical, a way or tool or a model to simulate different types of aspects around the disease and around different maybe sensitive subpopulations like the elderly, like children, like people with pre-existing conditions, and how that may change the course of their disease. And so again, the use of modeling and simulation and mathematics and applied mathematics in the study of this disease. Next slide, please. And finally, I think that my take-home message in this case is I think that the evolution of how we organize, we execute, and really communicate science may prove to be really among the most important legacies of this pandemic. And with that, I want to highlight the Carolina Away program. I'm fortunate enough to participate as one of the course leaders of the COVID investigation communities. And again, thinking about how we train really the next generation to do what we just learned how to do, accelerate science, accelerate innovation, and really what does it mean to have the need for speed? How do we really accelerate discovery within a few months and really shift our focus and grow a community around a common global need? So this course hopefully will also carry and stay on as a course where we start teaching and really transferring some of our knowledge that we have gained in the last few months to our students. Next slide, please. If you want to join us, again, we're growing the community please shoot me an email, look at us at Twitter or our website. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. That was so amazing and fascinating and so quick. Amazing. All right, Stephen, we'll turn it over to you, Stephen King.
So I'm a professor of emerging technologies, and in the Reese Innovation Lab, we got together virtually and said, how might we use emerging technologies, and then specifically got to AI. How might we use AI to help stop the spread of COVID? And our team began working and doing things, but we ultimately realized we needed help in addition to what we had available to us. And so next slide, please. So one of the things that I want to give you here is, since most of you are UNC internal, is kind of how our relationships work and what we're able to do. So we have all of these other projects that we do with other organizations, so media companies and technology companies, and we have connections with them both financially or through just partnerships of people helping and doing different projects together. And so we had access to a lot of people who with a lot of power to help us. So we've been working with Lenovo on previous projects in AI and AR and several other things. And so as we started solving this problem and we needed some help, we were able to quickly make that connection. And because they're a corporation and they have access to money quickly, they were able to also mobilize some funds very quickly as well. And so we were able to get to engineers to work through a problem. We also leveraged their connections. So some of the hardware that we were going to use was a specific chip that was developed by Intel. And we were having some issues trying to do something that had never been done before. And Lenovo was able to get us to the actual engineers who wrote the code that went directly to that chip. And that could not have happened without such previous relationship of them trusting us and having that back and forth prior. So the next slide, please. We also have relationships with foundations. And the foundations were not necessarily able to help us immediately, but it was their previous engagement with us that was able to help us by building up our infrastructure and us being able to have the technologies we needed to work. So over the last 3 years, we've been working with lots of different technologies in this field, and we had access to it. We had experience with it. So I see value in having a dual funding model. So we have the grants that fund us, that keep us moving and help us to find new discoveries and to work with technologies we couldn't afford to work with otherwise. But then we also have the corporations who are coming in to work together with us, to truly partner with us to find ways to solve problems. So next slide. So we've been working on a couple of things, specifically on the COVID one. Is Lexus 9 is a new startup that we are spinning out of the lab to take what we built in the lab and turn it out to the corporate world, so that corporations can use it, so that other universities can use it. And we have created the Health Greeter Kiosk. This is a standalone system that detects if you're wearing a mask. It detects if you are social distancing and helps encourage you through positive messaging. It can be put up at a restaurant, or as it's going to be on Saturday, it will be helping to keep the fans safe at Kenan Stadium when UNC goes to win the football game. So, so we're finding lots of different avenues for this. But one important thing for us was that the lab is not set up to service what corporate America is going to need on a long-term basis, because we're trying to create the new discovery. We needed someone for support and service and those types of things. And so that's where working with outside funders, the Carolina Angel Network, and people who have this experience in running businesses, and that we can basically take and license the technology to the business for them to go out and service, is a really great model for us to take the technology we have developed in the university and get it out there. Now, all the things I've said make the conflict of interest team go crazy. And I am sorry, I am probably one of the most complex clients that they have in the university. But we're trying new things both in the technology, and we're trying new things in the university. So I encourage you to find new ways to solve your problem, both I don't know how you say that, bureaucratically, thank you, that's the word, bureaucratically, as well as through the new innovations that we're working on.
Thank you so much, Stephen. Yeah, you know, conflicts of interest are great because it means you're, you know, pushing the boundaries and doing the conversion translational work. And so we have to find ways to help get, and we're all trying to work our way through that. And that's amazing. Thank you so much. So our last panelist is Nehemiah Stewart. Turn it over to you, Nehemiah.
Thank you so much, Judith. Truly, I'm so honored, amazed by all the work that's been done so far. I honestly hope I can keep up and honestly provide something of value during this time. But as Judith mentioned, my name is Nehemiah Stewart, and I'm a senior here at UNC-Chapel Hill, majoring in chemistry and mathematics. Home for me is Washington, D.C., but truly my past 4 years in Chapel Hill have been nothing short of amazing. As I'm sure many of you, being a former alumni, have plenty of stories and memories about good times in Chapel Hill. But truly, along with my research focus, I've been able to develop companies like Vector Rideshare, which focuses on connecting students and faculty across the country. Through these activities and rather different ventures I've been a part of, I've had the chance to form networks with very great, rather influential individuals like Judith Cone and others. But I didn't quite understand why I was called upon, or rather I'd formed these networks until the middle of June when George Floyd was murdered. You see, at that time, I got an email from our Black Student Movement group basically saying, Nehemiah, you being one of the most influential Black students on our campus, what can you do for the Black students? Of course, being a 20-year-old man, I think, well, what can I do to solve a problem that's been around for centuries, truly? But I began to think and synthesize information using the skills I had learned in the research labs long ago. And among this information, I began working with all the networks I formed at NCCU, Duke, UNC to form Level the Playing Field. And Akeem, if you can go forward. As I mentioned, as we began synthesizing information, quite a few rather stark statistics came to mind and came to the focus. The understanding that a large majority of our Black students graduate from HBCUs, but there's an incongruence in the resource distribution between our HBCUs and our primarily white institutions like UNC and Duke. And amongst this, we begin to really see that the main differences weren't purported towards how much rather was put into the students rather during their time before, but rather during their undergraduate tenure. The professional development that is not quite explicitly taught, and especially going towards the social capital that's necessary to have success in a career post-graduation. Understanding these incongruences, they sparked our conversations and they led us towards taking firm action, resolute action. And Akeem, if you can go on one more. Thereupon, as I mentioned, this lack of network and social capital for our students. I know many of us as we graduate out, we hear stories of our friends are going on to this internship or that internship using this network or that network. But for many of our Black students, that's not quite an opportunity. And in the same vein, the ability to speak and handshake with investors or otherwise, once again, if not taught in the household, where is that given? Where is that education really purported towards? Akeem, if you can go on forward again. So thereupon, we form Level the Playing Field. And Level the Playing Field is a 3-phase program centered around recruiting, training, and rather placing Black students into positions of influence and power. It became clear to ourselves that equality was one thing that was easy to say, sure, but equity is what we really needed. When we had conversations with organizations, like I'll speak on later on, often this topic of blind applications came about. This topic of equality was often thrown in the conversation, but we truly want equity. It's understanding who our student is. It's admitting and understanding rather that the student who comes from this disadvantaged background, who works several jobs, might have a different resume or application. So equity is raising us up so we can all find success together in these careers and building a community. I'll keep one more. And so briefly, I won't go into the names, but truly these individuals, and you can keep scrolling through for about another slide. Some of these individuals right here, these are the students rather that have worked with us thus far, and the advisors that have worked with us as well. If you can go on one more. And the staff members, I mentioned the network that we have formed across universities, those like Jawad Williams, Kind of Basketball, Dr. Henry McCoy at NCCU, Judith herself, amazing as always, Ralph House, a pure catalyst, an activation barrier lower. And it's been amazing work. And what we have done, all of us together, in this 3-phase program, is a series of professional development. So you can go on one more. Yep, and one more. We've taken 20 Black students from NCCU, UNC, and Duke through this 3-phase program beginning this year. And our first phase is professional development, building a LinkedIn presence, nailing the interview, how to dress for the interview, getting involved in research, things, as I mentioned, that are not explicitly taught, but are extremely necessary for success in any one field. In the second phase, we go on a curricular crossover. I begin working with Dr. Marilyn Mackowitz at Oregon State to develop a 1-credit-hour course to teach our students and rather have them apply these skill sets they've learned for success in their careers in real life and rather in a rather controlled setting of a curriculum. All this is to really catalyze. Once again, we threw that word around. I'm a chemistry major, so I can't help it. Suzanne, I know you're thinking, yes, keep it going. But nevertheless, truly we hope to catalyze that conversation, this exchange of resources that we might have once thought was incongruent, but truly 8 miles down the road, we're not that different. Although media and although many others might say, because you go to this school or that school, your background makes you either unable or rather incapable of finding success, I beg to differ. And these beautiful students you see on the screen are shining examples of innovation. We speak about, rather, Chancellor Guskiewicz spoke about innovation at UNC, but I speak about innovation of a community, innovation of a nation possibly. And what I see with these students, what the faculty we worked with thus far, is a true chance for catalytic change across our country. And so I'll keep one more. As I mentioned, the professional development aspect of it is pairing these students based on career fields with other individuals of similar like minds. So that is, if students are interested in STEM, all the way to real estate, we found mentors to pair them with for the year. And we began taking them through programs. Jeff Terrell in our app lab, he's holding a seminar, 8-week seminar, developing an application where our students can come in with their ideas and build out and actually become entrepreneurs in their own right. And we speak about this interdisciplinary aspect of it all. We bring in students from the STEM background and we give them entrepreneurial skills, and the same for our entrepreneurial or more business-oriented students. That is where change can come about. That is generational success. Now, Keith, one more if you please. The curricular crossover portion of it. As I mentioned, we began working with Dr. Marilyn Mackowitz over at Oregon State to develop an impactful curriculum she had originally designed for advancing women in STEM. Thereupon, however, we've begun working with Dr. Faoud and the School of Education and several others to put together this program where we will allow students to flex their schedules, and students from NCCU will take this course at UNC, and students from UNC will take this course at NCCU. One more, Akeem. The culmination of our program, and what I consider to be the most impactful, as I mentioned, a program that truly seeks to create change will require placement. We secured internships with, over 20 internships with impactful organizations for the summer of 2021 for our students. Companies like HBCU Heroes, DuPont Chemical, Wamba Dickinson, working with Carbon, working with Bank of America, a slew of other organizations who are not only offering internships at the entry level, but impactful positions. You see, I'm sure we all remember, or rather can recognize, as we look across our walls oftentimes at the former deans, they often look, or rather the demographic is rather homogenous. It's my belief, and it's my understanding, our team's understanding, that placement into these positions does not come about haphazardly. Oftentimes, it does require the social capital or the hand to find that way into these positions. It's our hope that through these internships, through this recruitment, through this training, and this intentional placement of Black students in these positions, man, wow, it might not be right now. It might not be next year, but in 5 years, maybe in 10 years, we'll see that coming president, that coming legislative member. And oh, wait a second, that's a level the playing field kid right there, wasn't it? Oh, wait a second, that running senator, that was a level the playing field young woman. And Akeem, one more slide. And so as we look ahead, and you can keep going, we've begun working with Gretchen Bellamy and Dr. Sibby Tompkins and the DEI to storehouse this program. So long after I'm gone, we can continue to impact lives and really scale this program. You can go one more. Beyond the tri-communal system, rather the tri-communal system of NCCU, UNC, and Duke, and begin to implement these same rigorous programs in other universities and other HBCU and PWIs, that is primarily white institution, communities. The same systems also work alongside of University of Maryland, where I'm from, DC area, and Howard. Or if we go to Atlanta with Georgia Tech, Morehouse, Spelman. What we see right now in our program, the data we've begun collecting shows that as individuals, although we're so unique, although everything around us makes it seem as though our experiences are so strangely indifferent to the next, truly, I believe that programs like ours can form that community that we've lacked so long. thank you for your time, and I apologize for taking so much of your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Nehemiah, that's great. So you started on this program after the death of George Floyd, the murder of George Floyd. So I guess it's 5 to 6 months. Is that right?
Yeah, right now, I guess it's about month 4. Yeah, so
Yeah,
we started
month 4.
out, I got
Okay.
that phone call from you, and then we
Right.
went right to work, Judith.
Yeah, that's right. I immediately called him. That was amazing. So I just coined a phrase, at the speed of need. I really like that. I'm going to like get that out and say that, because everything that we've heard today is the acceleration of response to need. And so at the speed of need, and I think you really exemplify how quickly, that's a very complex program they've put together. And honestly, he started from 0, but he's a brilliant networker, and he is obviously passionate and compelling, and just got everybody to work with him. And that's how things happen, because if he tried to do it alone, he could not have done it. And that, I think you heard all day today, is what people were saying. So thank you so much. I think, you know, we're over time. And so I would say that there could be 1 question per panelist. So I know that puts a challenge on Kimmy, who is the one sorting everything. So let's take 1 question, and then that will be the end of our session. And I think all of you for being here today. I mean, there was, I saw one counting was in 130 people on the call, and that's a lot of brain power here, spending this hour plus a few minutes over together. So, and for our amazing panelists. So Kimmy, do you want to ask 1 question, either general to all the panelists or specifically?
Sure. Thank you to all the panelists. We have a question come in for Nehemiah about what was your most difficult challenge in launching Level the Playing Field?
I think the most difficult aspect of it all had to have been internally. Being able to say, I'm going to rise above the feelings of any exhaustion and going beyond the conversations. I think conversations are necessary. You know, I think it's good to have a conversation, but when do we take action? When do we actually write that email? When do we actually stand up and begin to work towards something? And when I made the decision to push beyond just feeling tired, to push beyond being uncomfortable in a conversation, and I began to really, as Judith said, rely on the individuals who I knew had a better network than myself, or the resources than myself, and sat back at a broad scale and said, okay, well, if I can place this person here and this person here, and we all can put this effort towards it, that was the hardest part. Getting over that activation barrier. Once again, a chemistry reference, but truly, that was it.
Thank you, Nehemiah. I also want to encourage everyone to throw their LinkedIn or email address into the chat, because there's a few individuals that reached out interested in collaborating with our panelists. So, and I know a lot of our attendees like to collaborate as well. So I think that would open an opportunity just for us to connect after the event. I think we have time for 1 more because it's pretty short, and it's for Suzanne. This sounds like it will be an effective program for communities. Will the program release its findings so that other communities can learn and improve upon their own COVID-19 related concerns?
Yeah, thanks for the question. Absolutely. Our goal is, as you can see, to get this statewide, but ultimately we hope this will be a model for other large university systems that are positioned to take advantage of some of the resources on their various campuses, and ultimately use them to help deploy graduate students in communities where they can both make a difference and also have a difference made in their career paths.
All right. Kimmy, is that it?
Yes, we can wrap up there.
Okay, great. Well, thank you all. This was very inspiring. I just want to work harder, faster, and at the speed of need. So I think we have a slide coming up on innovation updates. Take a look at this. We're not going to talk about it. You all have been following some of these things. You know, we're all here to talk with you, and anything you want to follow up with, go on to Innovate, look at team, and all of our pictures and our roles are there, and our contact information. So I wish I could talk about all these, but we don't have time. And so the final slide is this: how you stay connected. We're on every platform in every way, telling your story and championing the amazing people in our community at the Choose University, and how we keep the goals of making a difference in the world as our primary target. Can't thank you enough for being with us. I wish we had more time, but we will talk again at another time, and I wish you all the best and a good week ahead. Take care of yourselves. Bye.
Thank you, everybody.